My dear 12th class economics students, Assalamu alaikum. In our previous lecture, we studied law of returns to factor, and that law exhibits the short-run production function, that is the type of production function with only one factor variable while keeping the quantities of other factors constant. Now in this video lecture, we will discuss another important law of production theory, which is the law of returns to scale. And this law exhibits the long run production function where all the factors of production are variable. That is, a firm in the long run can change all the factor inputs in order to increase the level of output. Dear students, the term returns to scale refers to the changes in output as all factors change by the same proportion. That is, the law of returns to scale states how the output behaves as all inputs are varied. Dear students, as we know that in the long run all factors of production are variable, that is no factor is fixed. Accordingly, the scale of production can be changed by changing the quantity of all factors of production. If we go by the term returns to scale, dear students, returns refers to change in physical output and scale refers to quantity of input employed or quantity of factors of production employed. Thus, the law of returns to scale examines the relationship between output and the scale of inputs in the long run when all the inputs are increased in the same proportion or in the same ratio. Now, dear students, the assumptions of the law of returns to scale. First important assumption of the law is all the factors of production are variable. That is, all the factors of production such as land, labor, capital are variable, or we can say a firm can increase the output of goods and services by increasing all the factor inputs. Second important assumption of the law is technology remains constant. That is, the law assumes constant technological state, which means there is no change in technology during the time considered. Third important assumption of the law is outputs, or we can say returns, are measured in physical terms. And the last important assumption of the law is the market is perfectly competitive. Dear students, a perfectly competitive market is that type of market where there are large number of buyers and sellers. Sellers are selling homogeneous or we can say identical products and they are free to enter and exit the market. Now, dear students, coming to the stages of returns to scale. Students, when a firm increases all the factor inputs proportionately, there are three possibilities. Number first possibility is total output may increase more than proportionately. That is, the proportionate or percentage increase in output is more than the proportionate increase in inputs. This is the case of increasing returns to scale. Number second possibility is total output may increase proportionately, or we can say the increase in output is the same as the increase in factor inputs, and this is the situation of constant returns to scale. And the third important possibility here is the total output may increase less than proportionately, or we can say the proportionate increase in output is less than the proportionate increase in inputs, and this is the case of decreasing returns to scale. Accordingly, there are three kinds of returns to scale, or we can say there are three stages of returns to scale. Stage first, increasing returns to scale. Stage second, constant returns to scale. And stage third, decreasing returns to scale. Now let us discuss these three stages one by one in a much greater depth. Firstly, stage first, which is increasing returns to scale. Dear students, increasing returns to scale refers to a situation when percentage increase in all factor inputs causes proportionately greater increase in output. For example, if the amount of inputs are doubled and the output increases by more than double, it is the case of increasing returns to scale. Or we can say that 10% increase in inputs leads to 20% increase in output, or increase in output is more than the increase in inputs. This type of return is known as increasing returns to scale. Dear students, when a firm expands, the increasing returns to scale are generally obtained in the beginning. And this stage is also known as a stage of decreasing cost. That is, when there is increase in the scale of production, it leads to lower average cost per unit produced, and hence initially, or in the initial stage, average cost of a firm starts decreasing, and hence this stage is also known as stage of decreasing cost. Dear students, this stage occurs due to economies of large scale production. Now the question is, what are economies of scale? Economies of scale are the cost advantages that a firm obtains due to their scale of operation, with cost per unit of output decreasing with increase in scale. That is, average cost decreases with increase in the level of output. So when a firm achieves greater output at lesser costs or at lesser per unit costs, then we can say the firm achieves or enjoys the economies of scale. And initially a firm enjoys economies of scale due to various reasons, and some of the important reasons are indivisibility of factors. Dear students, some factors are available in large and lumpy units, such as capital, machinery, land, and these factors can therefore be utilized with utmost efficiency at a large scale of output. Therefore, in the case of some indivisible and lumpy factors, that is, those factors which are not perfectly divisible, when output is increased from a small level to a large one, indivisible factors are better utilized and therefore increasing returns to scale are obtained. Another important reason of the economies of scale is the use of specialized labor and machinery. Dear students, returns to scale or increasing returns to scale can be obtained because of greater possibilities of specialization of labor and machinery. The use of specialized labor and machinery initially helps in increasing the productivity of labor and capital per unit, which automatically results in increasing returns to scale. Dear students, we can illustrate the increasing returns to scale with the help of a diagram given here. Here in this figure, OX, or we can say x-axis, represents the units of variable factors. That is, here we take labor and capital as the variable factor, while OY, that is y-axis, shows the increase in output or simply returns. Here we can see that when variable factors, that is labor and capital, increases from Q to Q1, output also increases from P to P1, which is higher than the increase in factor of production. That is, here the distance from Q to Q1 is less than the distance from P to P1. That is, here in this figure, output, the increase in output is greater, or the increase in returns is greater than the increase in variable factors. So this is the case of increasing returns to scale. Now coming to another stage of law of returns to scale, which is constant returns to scale. Dear students, constant returns to scale refers to a situation when percentage increase in all factor inputs causes equal proportionate increase in output. That is, output increases exactly in the same proportion in which factors of production are increased. For example, if factors of production are doubled, output will also be doubled. Students, the constant scale of production has no effect on cost per unit produced, or we can say on average cost. Constant returns to scale operates when firm has achieved the point of maximum capacity. That is the point beyond which the output increases less than the increase in inputs. Dear students, this constant returns to skills of this stage occurs due to combined effect of economies and diseconomies of scale. Economies of scale we already defined. Now the diseconomies of scale. Diseconomies of scale is the opposite of economies of scale, and the diseconomies of scale or the cost, these are the cost disadvantages that accrue to firms due to an increase in organizational size beyond their maximum capacity, which results in production of goods and services at increasing per unit cost, or we can say at increasing average cost. And here, in the case of constant returns to scale, the economies of scale are exactly equal to the diseconomies of scale, and thus economies of scale are balanced by diseconomies of scale and hence no effect on average cost. That is, average cost remains constant or remains same in this stage. This stage can also be illustrated or explained with the help of figure. Here in this figure, same along the x-axis, we take the variable factors, and the y-axis represents the returns or the increase in output. And here we can see that when factors of production, that is the labor and capital, increases from Q to Q1, output also increases from P to P1. And here in this figure, the increase in output is exactly the same as the increase in inputs. That is, the distance from Q to Q1 is exactly the same as the distance from P to P1. So in this case, output increases exactly in the same percentage as the increase in inputs. So in this case, the output curve or returns curve is upward sloping, perfectly straight line. Now coming to third important stage of the law of returns to scale, and this is the final stage, which is decreasing returns to scale. Dear students, decreasing returns to scale refers to a situation when percentage increase in all factor inputs causes proportionately less increase in output. For example, if the amount of inputs are doubled and the output increases by less than double, or we can say that 10% increase in inputs leads to 5% increase in output, or the increase in output, the percentage increase in output is less than the percentage increase in inputs. This type of returns is known as decreasing returns to scale. Dear students, this decreasing returns to scale occurs if firm keeps on increasing the inputs even after the stage of optimum, or we can say maximum capacity. This stage is also known as the stage of increasing cost. That is, in this stage, average cost or the cost per unit produced starts rising, which occurs because of diseconomies of large scale production. And diseconomies of scale are due to increasing difficulties of management, coordination, and control with the expansion in scale and output. That is, when the firm has expanded to a much greater size, it is difficult to manage it with the same efficiency as previously. And this decreasing returns to scale can be explained with this figure here. And here in this figure, x-axis same represents the quantity of variable factors or the units of labor and capital here in this case, and the y-axis represents the increase in output or returns. Here we can see that when variable factors, that is labor and capital, increases from Q to Q1, output also increases from P to P1, which is less than the increase in factors of production. That is, in this case, the distance from Q to Q1 is greater, while as the distance from P to P1 is less, which means that the percentage increase in outputs is less than the percentage increase in inputs. Or we can say the output increases proportionately less than the increase in inputs, and this is the final stage of the law of returns to scale, which is known as the decreasing returns to scale. So dear students, this is all about the law of returns to scale. So in our previous lecture, we studied returns to factor, one important law of microeconomics or production theory. And in this video lecture, we discussed another important law of production theory, which is returns to scale. And the main difference between returns to factor, or we can say short run production function, and the returns to scale, or we can say long run production function, is that the returns to factor exhibits the short run production function, that is that type of production function where output can be increased by increasing only variable factors while keeping other factors constant. And in case of returns to scale, this type of returns exhibits the long run production function where output can be increased by increasing all the factors of production or by changing all the factors of production. Another important main difference between the returns to factor and returns to scale is the three important stages of returns to factor are: first one is the stage of increasing returns to factor, second is stage of diminishing returns to factor, and third one is stage of negative returns to factor. However, in case of returns to scale, the three important stages are: number first stage is stage of increasing returns to scale, second stage is stage of constant returns to scale, and number third stage is stage of decreasing returns to scale. Thank you, dear students.